Welcome to our second series of lessons from a birth or baby business owner. This is the show where we'll be speaking to those who are in or who have been in the birth and baby business world to ask them the questions that you would like to know the answer to on how they got to where they are in business right now. My name's Anna LaGrange and I'm one half of Baba Business, the Birth and Baby Business Academy.
And my name's Liz Stanford and I'm the other half of Baba Business, the community membership for birth and baby business owners. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with the lovely Dee Bell. So Dee is a registered midwife, international board certified lactation consultant and specialist tongue-tie practitioner based near Brighton in the UK with over 20 years of experience, including 16 years in the NHS. Dee now runs Birth, Baby and You, a private clinical practice specialising in infant feeding and tongue-tie support. She has assisted thousands of families and performed numerous tongue-tie releases over the past 13 years. In 2021, Dee founded the Infant Feeding Academy to share her expertise. She has since trained over 200 infant feeding practitioners and offers advanced training through the Accredited Tongue-tie Assessor Award. In addition to this, Dee provides online masterclasses covering topics such as slow weight gain, low milk supply, understanding tongue-tie, induced lactation and strategies for non-latching babies. Because Dee knows firsthand the challenges the NHS face, she provides an NHS Scholarship to NHS staff members, supporting families with infant feeding on every course. Dee is passionate, very passionate, we both know this, about providing expert, personalised support to new families and educating fellow practitioners in the field. Through the Infant Feeding Academy, she offers a comprehensive membership programme for professionals, providing ongoing education, support and resources to enhance their skills in infant feeding care. Whoa, boom. I mean, what a bio. So I can't wait to kind of really dig into this, Dee. And I want to know what led you to your business. So obviously the Infant Feeding Academy you put it together because you've got so much expertise, but what was it that you were seeing or experiencing or feeling that just drove you to create that business?
Thank you. Hi, Liz and Anna. I sound about 100, don't I, after you read that intro? I'm not that old, I promise. So what led me to it was my passion within my NHS role. I'd got into midwifery because I wanted to do person-centred care. I was a Ina May Gaskin, style midwife, thought it was going to be all about the families in my care, and then had this NHS role, specialised in infant feeding, and I felt like I was battling those in authority to provide the care that was on my job description. So I'm quite literal, so it says this is what I do, so that's what I was trying to do, and then was very, very confused by me trying to put in the training, trying to put in the care, and the powers that be sort of getting in the way of me providing the training I felt that the staff members needed to have in order to provide the care that the families were requiring, and asking for. So when I had my own little girl and therefore had a natural break because of maternity leave, that's when you kind of have a bit of a look at your life and what you want to do, and you've had that break and you're going to be going back to your job, and sort of I just thought, is this what I want to do? Is this the work-life balance I want to have? And I've just felt passionately about the providing the care, so went into private practice, and I felt terribly guilty taking my skills in private practice and taking them away from the NHS, and did actually sort of talk to the NHS about what I could do for them and how it would work for me to stay in my role. And I'm sorry to say, and I'm not NHS bashing at all, but I'm sorry to say at that time, the trust I worked for really just didn't get it. the one of the head of midwifery said to me at the time, but why do we need a lactation consultant? All midwives are breastfeeding specialists. And I said, well, unfortunately, I think you'll find they're not. So it just seemed strange to me that I was trying to like raise these levels of support given in really low cost ways. I was just saying, and we were doing, say, day techs. When something went wrong, I'd be looking at the notes, and I would have a particular person I wanted to get in to train with me, and like 2 years on and I'm still not got this person in front of me, and they're still out there practicing. So when I started working for myself, I always had it in the back of my head that I'd taken my skills away from the NHS, and all these people that should have been benefiting were now not benefiting, and people were paying me privately, but that meant only a certain small amount of people could then get that support that I sort of was giving away, if you know what I mean. It wasn't for free, obviously I had a salary, but I felt like I was there trying to give it away and not be paid privately. So in the back of my mind was always that I wanted to go on to train more people somehow, so that we could get more people with a higher quality of care being given to them.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What a story, and what a legacy you are creating as well. Like it's really wonderful for us to see you and your business going from strength to strength. But I wanted to pick up on a few things that you said. So it's really relatable to have that maternity leave epiphany. Like I'm sure that so many people watching or listening to this are going, yeah, that's when I decided I wanted to, go into the birth or baby world, or take my skills, out of the NHS and into private practice. And what I really wanted to pick up on was that kind of guilt piece that you said around the private practice. That is so common, isn't it? Especially, within breastfeeding services. So how did you get over that kind of guilt bit? Was that a mind shift? A mindset shift, or did you have to do something in particular to kind of reconcile yourself with that?
Yeah, well, I think initially I did what lots of people do, which is undercharge.
Yeah.
So firstly, it was not wanting to charge the people that wanted to see me the money it would cost me, for the childcare while I was gone, the petrol, my time. And I was on maternity leave on, £12,000 a year. And I realised that I was pretty much subsidising these visits to these people's houses if I wasn't going to charge accordingly.
Yeah.
So quite quickly, because I realised that, because I was a single mum as well, so going back and doing night shifts and things, it was quite difficult for me. I knew that this kind of running my own business is what I wanted. I wanted to be able to take her to nursery or pick her up or have days at home with her, and not have that kind of set regime of working with the NHS. So I raised my prices was the first thing I did, and then to set that off, then volunteered. And I think that's the advice that I give to a lot of the students I train who are struggling with charging, is that you need to charge your worth to the clients that can pay. And then, a way of offsetting that is to provide a free drop-in or free support or free resources. And funnily enough, actually, even today, we're now going to be offering a free follow-up to all of my clinic clients. And I was just writing an email to them, and it says, come along to this free group Zoom every week for as long as you want, until maybe the child's started school. That might be beyond my remit, but they can come to the free small group Zoom with questions about weaning in 6 months' time if they want to. And then I've put on the bottom, however, if you would like a one-to-one, then please book that here.
Yeah.
So it's their option to see me, with maybe 3 or 4 other families on that Zoom. And if they'd like one-to-one, then they need to book it privately, because it will obviously there's a lot of different input and follow-up and that kind of thing. So I think that's the way to offset feeling guilty. And it I feel like that's the way everybody wins as well, because if you're not paid a reasonable amount, then why would I spend time with their family instead of my own? And that's what I see happening. It's like, and I've spoken to people on the phone on Christmas Day. I've had people beg to come round to the clinic, and then I realised that my own daughter's going, mummy, please, you said you'd help me with my homework tonight, or you said you'd do this with me tonight, and I said, I'm just talking to this lady, can you wait? And you realise that you put your own family's needs after the needs of your client. So it's finding those firmer boundaries.
Yeah. Oh, it can so hard, can't it? I think any of us working in the lactation world can really agree with you there, Dee, and really resonate, because it is so. The thing is, lactation care for most parts of the NHS is just a complete mess. It causes a huge amount of damage, which many of us spend a lot of time unpicking and undoing as lactation specialists, trained lactation specialists, I should say. Make that clear.
Yes, yes.
And
not just the title.
I think the guilt, in a way, like, I understand the guilt, not so much from that role, but not, I loved working for the NHS, like, because it felt like a really good thing to say to you. Like, I worked for the NHS. It felt really like wholesome. It was a big part of my identity for for a long, long time. It was a hard thing to leave. But the problem with the NHS when it comes to infant feeding is because infant feeding isn't invested in, because it's not really understood, because it's not put alongside, it's not actually treated like any other division of healthcare in any part of the NHS. Because of that, actually, we can't do our jobs properly in the NHS, unfortunately. There are some rare roles and some people, and I know they do a great job and they might be supported by their trust, but that's quite rare, really, that NHS trusts and the people who do procurement and all the budgeting and stuff that really understand it. So I think it's it's a huge problem, and it's steeped in so much history. So I always kind of moved on from the guilt of it by just thinking, it's not a system that I can actually do. Like you were saying, I can't actually do the best to my abilities in that system. I can't. I'm like, my skills aren't used properly in that system, and it's a really sad thing, isn't it? And I think it's, luckily there are, like, for some people, pots of funding and things that are used for people to set up these services and have specialist services in their communities. Obviously, Kent did really well at that for quite a long time. But I say a similar thing to my students, as you do, which I say there is other ways to do this. You don't have to just have private services. Like, there is funding you can get. You can set up a CIC. You can do, like, there's different, you talked about volunteer groups, but there's things like having like a three-tiered payment process where this is a standard cost, this is how much it would cost if you were to support somebody else, and then those who need it could have that like free or cheaper or subsidised is the right word, subsidised care. Obviously we've got other models like Carmel Gentle, who's in our world, in the tongue-tie world, who's got she does her kind of funded pay what you can and tongue-tie clinic. So there is some really, like, you're one example, and there are other great examples of where, people, where we can bridge that gap, but also bridge our own mindset when it comes from moving from either volunteer services or NHS services into that sort of private healthcare mentality. I have to say, moving here to South Africa and now running my own lactation clinic, it is like so much easier, because it's private healthcare here. So it's just, you know what I mean? It's really interesting. Is a completely different mindset, because here the paediatricians expect me to go and pitch to them. They want me to go and pitch to them. They want me to recommend their services. I want them to recommend my services. They don't hesitate when I try and book an appointment. They're like, "Yeah, can you come tomorrow?" They're really excited to meet me. So it's this, as much as there's having a private system is obviously not necessarily the best as a nation for the people of South Africa. At the same time, from a professional point of view, it does make my life a lot easier. And I think that's something that I hadn't realised, I don't think, until recently, how much different that is for those of us in the birth and baby world, particularly those of us who are running a service, which some sort of service like that is available in the NHS, actually, it makes it much harder in lots of ways for us to start and run those businesses in a way that, like, for example, here in South Africa, it isn't, because it's got that private healthcare system. So I think we need to be kind to ourselves a little bit as well, and be like, you know, we can't just go down to our local midwife and go, can you recommend my services? Because she might not be allowed to do that or be able to. I mean, you know, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that stuff, but I think we also need to be kind to ourselves and say, actually, this stuff can feel a bit harder, and that's okay. But, you know, there's people, those of us who are doing it and have made it work. So, you know, you can do it, and just be, don't beat yourself up about it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
What's really interesting. Yeah, in what you're saying there, one of the things that just made me think about it is the whole, like, not recommending other people's services. So when I was working at the hospital, and in my local, I'll speak very highly of Brighton, in my local hospital in Brighton, they actually would quite happily say to mums, you know, there's no clinic for the next 3 weeks, but you can go private. And they would say my name because I was the only person working privately. So it's a little bit ridiculous to not tell them who. And I realised the reason, you know, healthcare professionals aren't supposed to recommend is because it's left over from, you know, quite a long while ago, where you might be saying, oh, your baby needs an osteopath. My husband's an osteopath, you know, and you're very clearly touting for business. But if you've got a baby with a tongue tie and there's no NHS clinic, and then someone says, you know, well, what do we do? And then that midwife says, well, there's this person and this person. They're just giving information, because we've never had a problem telling mums as a midwife. We'd always say, oh, you can do NCT. So you are recommending, but I mean, you can also say, these are the people in your area that do it. You know, please do due diligence and check that you're happy with their qualifications or whatever. But also, funnily enough, in tongue tie, you actually can't be a registered tongue-tie practitioner unless you're registered with the CQC. So it's not really like I could even be someone dodgy, because you can't be registered. So interestingly, in Brighton, they've always been quite forward thinking, and they'd often say, or a mum might say, oh, I'm seeing Dee, and the midwives would just say, oh, brilliant, just ask her to leave us a plan, would you? And they would just let me leave them the notes. They'd follow what I said. Whereas in another hospital that isn't quite so forward thinking, where I've worked, they say, we can't, you know, we can't recommend anybody. And parents would Google and find me and say, oh, we've waited 5 weeks and then I just can't go on anymore. And then we found that you're just here. Why didn't they tell us? Like, why would somebody withhold the information that you can go private, you know? Because, you know, if you're waiting for a heart bypass or something like that, or a knee surgery, it's more common knowledge that they can look up a private clinic. But if midwives are saying, oh, well, there's no clinic for the next 6 weeks, the family are assuming there's no answer for the next 6 weeks.
Solution.
You know? So they should be being, I feel. I feel that they should be told.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, in some sections of the NHS, particularly in primary healthcare, they will actually pay for you to go private if they have got a certain length of blood. There's some services, and I think breastfeeding should be the same, especially where we've got this postcode lottery where, you know, there's different availability in different areas. I had this with a gynecological thing once. They messed up my appointment and they said, it's okay, we'll send you to the private hospital. And I went to the private hospital the next week, and that was covered by my GP. So where there's a will, there is a way, where, you know, and so I totally agree with you, Dee. And I also think even if someone isn't officially allowed to recommend you, it's still very much worth your while making sure that you know all of your people in your area. Go and meet your midwives, go and meet your who else might be, health visitors, the people who work, and you go and join your MPV, go to some of the MPV meetings so that you're getting your face and your name known. I was very lucky. I had a midwife who I really liked. We got on brilliantly, and she used to keep my flyers in her drawer. And she would be like, even though they ran a similar, well, it wasn't similar at all, of course, but they ran their own breastfeeding group. She said, there's certain mums who I see who I know would really love your training, and she used to give that to them. They couldn't put a post on my wall. So it's always worth, like, just building up those relationships, isn't it, and getting to know people. And even if you're not from an NHS background yourself. Yeah.
Definitely.
I would love to know, Dee, how long did it take, once you went into private practice, how long did it take for your practice to become what you would call like thriving? Because I know it is obviously very thriving, very busy. So what was that transition
So,
like?
I when I was a midwife, or while I am a midwife, but while I was working in my NHS role, I I'm very entrepreneurial. So even though that was my first kind of really real job that just stretched out ahead of me, because prior to that I'd always done like theatre and so project work. So I was kind of very daunted by the fact that this job was just my job now for the next, 20, 30 years, whatever it was. So on the side, I was doing antenatal classes under Birth, Baby and You. So I taught active birth yoga and active birth classes that were quite popular while I was still a midwife. The NHS had tried to say, my supervisor actually, or no, someone said to my supervisor, do you know that Dee is running these classes alongside her midwifery? And my supervisor's brilliant and said, oh yes, absolutely, I'll follow her on Facebook. And this other person went, oh, okay. Like, why would you want to stop these women going to active birth classes? Surely that's better for the trust, that they're going, they're well informed. So I was doing that all along. Then when I had time off with Florence, I just would just get like a trickle of inquiries. And I got an inquiry when Florence was 3 weeks old. And I said, oh, I'm not advertising at the moment because I've just had a baby myself. And the lady was like, oh, I don't know what to do, I'm desperate. And I said, well, I can come along, but I've got a 3-week-old baby with me. And she's like, oh, yes, please. So I just took Florence with me and then used her. And the mums they didn't care at all. Do you know what I mean? Like they loved it. And I would use Florence as a demonstration until she got a bit too, kind of boisterous. And then it just picked up. But then, as I say, I then hit that kind of, I didn't have very many hours that I was childcare free. So I hit that kind of 1-to-1 ceiling. And you need to do something. So I raised my prices. And that was so scary because I was like, no one will pay more than £45 to see me. I'm sure they won't. And then I just thought, right, I haven't got any more hours and I need to earn more money. So I raised my prices and I just got busier and then busier. And I had, as a tongue-tie practitioner, I had really shied away from running a clinic. I was determined in my mind that people only wanted home visits. They've just had a baby. They'll only want to see me at home. No one's going to want to travel. But then I set up a clinic during COVID because I worked all the way through COVID and people travelled. And now I have a full clinic, every clinic I run. But I can see more people and it's easier for me to see them in a clinic because, you can quickly wipe it down between people and then it's back to back. Whereas I was I was driving the M25 kind of corridor and driving about 200 miles a day between visits. And someone would, book a visit in the morning, then I'd have a visit somewhere else in the afternoon. And then a third person would ring and it'd be back near where I was in the morning. And then I'd have to get home. So I started going, just having clinics. But I mean, in terms of how long it took, I don't know. I suppose Florence was born in 2013 and I became 100% self-employed in 2015 and then just got busier and busier and then started the training other people in around 21, 22, somewhere around the COVID-y time.
Amazing. It's so scary, isn't it, raising your prices? But the way that you talk about it, you had no choice if you were going to make a living from what you were doing, and there wasn't being a single mom, etc. There was probably limited alternatives for you at that point. So I know lots of people are going to be listening and going, "Oh, raising prices," but I think you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to value yourself as well.
Yeah, every time I've raised my prices, periodically, I have never seen a dip. The price raise has come in along because I'm getting too busy, and then I've raised the price, and the getting busy is just carries on. But then the income's raised because the price has gone up as well, But as I say, in conjunction with earning more money and being busier, I then make more resources that can be downloaded. I feel I'm more generous with giving stuff away. You know, for whatever reason, you know, things I do, I'm just like, yeah, I'll give a masterclass. Yeah, that person can come for free. Often, like somebody that saw me who was international, I think she was in America, lactation consultant, had seen a presentation I'd done, and she said, "Oh, would you mind if I use this slide? I'll give you credit." And I said, "Yeah, sure. Do you want the original photos?" And she was like, "Oh, wow, that'd be amazing." You know, you're able to just be much more generous.
Yeah.
And you know, and therefore her practice is now impacting other people, because I've shared pictures of laid back feeding that were my originals, so she doesn't have to buy them, she can have them, you know, so you get to be more generous as well.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think that the work that we all do within the birth and baby world, whatever area you're in, it is all about ensuring that people have access to care and to support and to the resources. So I don't know why this question just popped into my head. I'm going to ask it anyway. I was just wondering, have you ever had any kind of like difficult relationships, either locally with other businesses or online, if you like, that you've kind of had to navigate? Because I know that that can sometimes be a challenge for people, like this idea of competition. And I think I struggled with it right at the beginning when I first set up my local hypnobirthing business. I was the only one, and then people started setting up around me, and I remember feeling like, no, this is mine, you know, that kind of feeling. And you have to let that go, you have to work through it. But I was just wondering if you've ever experienced anything like that.
Yeah, I think when I was moonlighting, or whatever you'd like to call it, when I was in the NHS, I think there was quite a lot of professional jealousy, and I think somebody said that to me once, and it just stuck with me. It's professional jealousy, and they were like, well, why is she doing these classes, and how come I think she's working privately, and it's often comes from somebody who perhaps doesn't feel able to, you know, doesn't have the, what's the word, I was going to say brevity, is that a word, isn't brave enough to branch out on their own. They wish they could do something like that too. And so there was a bit of that from my NHS job, but I was so kind of, it wasn't my world, so I was able to kind of to move away. And then as a private practitioner, I'm a massive, you know, as you both know, massive collaborator. I just always think, well, more people will benefit from that. And like, you know, it's knowledge, you know, I'm not very businessy about, I must keep that as my own. And I think also the whole, you know, the yoga teacher analogy, like if you wanted to start a yoga class, you wouldn't go, oh, I can't start a yoga class, there's already a yoga teacher. You know, because everybody likes different personalities, and I'm definitely not some people's cup of tea in terms of how I work as a lactation consultant. So there are people that will come to my group that wouldn't go to like a local breastfeeding counsellors group, and there's people that would prefer to go to their group. But locally, I did have, I met a breastfeeding counsellor once at the group I volunteered at, and I was introduced to her, and the person that introduced me was so chuffed and delighted that I was going to be volunteering, that she said, oh, you know, come and meet, this is Dee, she's our lactation consultant and she's going to be volunteering with us. And the lady said, yes, I know who you are. And I was just like, oh, and I never worked out exactly what that meant. She just said, yes, I know who you are. And you just think, oh my goodness, like what's gone ahead? But what have I done? But she was very, very felt very threatened. I think that I was an IBCLC and she was a breastfeeding counsellor, and I was in that group, and people would want to speak to me, not her. But the way I dealt with that is just carry on being me, and you know, and just, you know, and you just think that's your stuff, that's not my stuff.
Your issue.
So I will come and I will do what I do, and if I'm not your cup of tea, or you've heard stuff about me that you don't like, or if you feel threatened, that's It's not my problem. But I was talking to the group this week, and we were talking about being coaches and mentors and consultants, and one of the things I said to them this week, and somebody fed back that it was really useful, I said, just be you, because there might be someone who's very soft and fluffy, and some women will really want that, and you might be quite, so these are, this is what I recommend, do this, do that, and someone's going to really like that. So if you try and be anything other than you, you're just going to tie yourself in knots. So be your style, do show what you're like. It'll turn people off and it'll turn people on, and and I think the more I've lent into just being me and coming across of me and not worrying what people think, the more I've enjoyed it, particularly things like Instagram. Do you know what I mean? Like, I used to hate lives on Instagram. I do it, or not lives, even pre-recorded for Instagram, when I do like 5 takes. Now you're lucky if I've even brushed my hair, let alone put makeup on, because I just think this is what I'm going to say. I call it a one-take wonder. It only gets re-recorded if somebody, I don't know, comes in and speaks to me or something. Otherwise, it just is what it is. And interestingly, the response to that is always like really good compared to when I tried to contrive it. It wasn't getting very much response at all, whereas now, it's however you see me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So important. It's such a good message to be yourself, and I think we all I think especially when we're starting off in business, you're looking up to people you've often followed in somebody else's footsteps because you really admire them. Perhaps they've inspired you to come into the birth and baby world, and I think when you first step into it, you don't always know who you are in this baby, and I think it takes time, doesn't it, to figure that out and be comfortable with being yourself and putting yourself out there. But I really love that message.
And the comparison.
Yes, oh my gosh, the comparison, exactly, and feeling like we'll never get there or we'll never be like them. But we don't want you to be a copycat of somebody else. That doesn't.
I can remember
that doesn't
though. I can actually remember ringing Anna maybe like 5 or 6 years ago and saying, "So I want to do an online course. Like, how do you do an online course?" And then Anna saying, "Oh well, there's Teachable, and there's Kajabi, and there's this and there's that." And I said, "Well, I'm doing this." And I can remember Anna saying, "Well, I'm going to be bringing out this." And both of them were in their, conceptual stages. And I said, "Oh, mine's very much a how-to." And Anna was like, "Well, mine's very much, the mindfulness behind that." And I was like, "Right." And she just said, "Oh, you can look at Thinkific, look at this, look at that." And just saying, that's okay. You're doing something, you've got a different take on it. It's all to help people who are having babies and breastfeeding, but you're going a different route, and then obviously they both turned out to be very different products at the end. So
yeah, I think that's so true, and I think it's so easy, isn't it, to feel like you were saying, Liz, to feel like somebody's stepping on your path. Look, it's normal for us to feel threatened. That's just part of the way our brain is made up. We're supposed to live in a community of people. That's how we don't ever want to feel like an outsider, and we also, being competitive is part of the human nature. So I think you're always going to have those underlying feelings. But I think if you're coming from the right place, and very rarely have I been unsupportive of somebody who's come to me with their breastfeeding idea or their business, or to say I'm also want to come in. I think the more the merrier, especially in lactation. Like, we just need so much more. And what you and I offer is very different. I mean, we are going to be doing something together soon, which is really like doing a few more crossovers, which I think has been probably about 5 years in the making. So that feels really good. But I think, I totally agree. And I know people that have done both of our courses. So, obviously other people see us as quite different providers as well, even though on the surface of it, we are, if you like, competitors. But I don't think either of us really see it that way, which is great. I wanted to ask you a little bit, Dee, about your business setup. Like, you've obviously grown massively in the last 5 years or so. What point did you start thinking, okay, I really need some help here. I can't do this all on my own. Like, and how did you go about that process of sort of growing your business with the help of others?
Probably when I met Liz, funnily enough. I don't know when that was. It was a few years ago. It was when the tech and the systems, it was evident that they were needed. So I think prior to that, I was able to use, women were phoning me up saying, oh, I'd like an appointment. I was sitting there looking at my diary saying, okay, I think I can fit you in on Tuesday. Can you text me your address? And I was doing everything in paper and pen pretty much. I think I might have had a paper diary actually as well. I quite liked the paper diary. So I was doing it, paper diary type thing. I would go to someone's house. I was, I think at one point I was even using like a carbon paper to write my notes and leave, rip it off and leave them a copy. Oh, yes. No, again, I've made myself sound really old now, haven't I? But I dragged my feet a little bit with tech. I wasn't bothered about having an iPhone. I wasn't bothered about I've never been particularly like gadget orientated, so I'm not really bothered about being cutting edge, with IT. Mm. So my attitude was, it's not broke, don't fix it. But what was then happening was I would be out at work and people were ringing me, and I was like, if I took the phone call, I then had, was writing it on the back of the receipt while I was in the car, and then I was getting home, and of course as my daughter got older, once I got home or once I walked through the door, people want to know what time's dinner and what's happening, and then mentally I didn't have that time to sit down and then do the paperwork and send the woman and things like I wasn't invoicing people. I was saying to people, oh yeah, I'll send you an email with that in, and then 3 days would go by, and then I'd think, or even look back in my diary and realise I hadn't emailed someone something. So I guess it was when I realised I needed to start automating systems, needing to kind of up level my tech knowledge and my tech use. And then, ironically now, we use kind of lots of tech. We do design stuff and websites and things like that. And I recently had a chat with a lady who's a midwife who's become an IBCLC, and she wanted me to look at her systems. And she said to me, I just wanted to give them the piece of paper for them to sign in their house. And I went, oh, no, now come on. We can just, that could be the T's and C's as a tick box on you. And she said, oh, no, I'll send it to them by email. And I said, okay, in a year's time, you're going to be coming back to me and saying, Dee, can you help me automate this? So I think it was at that point when I needed to know kind of just what other people were doing. I hadn't looked up really. I was just inventing my own way of working through my day. And then I thought, hang on a minute, there are other people out there doing things with automation and systems. I need to know what these systems are. And then looked up for coaching and to be in masterminds and to kind of see what other people were doing. And then you realise, there wasn't anything around that was industry specific like you guys are doing now. So it had to be non-industry specific, and I'm very good at applying it to my own industry. I don't need that. I can just be told it could be for anything, and then you can apply it. But there wasn't any mentoring available that was industry specific really, especially that was perhaps for UK businesses, maybe more in America. But again, it was not really midwifery or lactation. So it was getting general coaching, seeing how other people are doing it, looking at other entrepreneurs, and then I've carried on doing that since, looking at other people's models and thinking, how could I apply that to my business to make things better.
Brilliant. And now, would you be without a coach now? Do you find that is like a really integral part of your growth in your business?
I think I need to take breaks because there's so many leaps that each time I join something, I have so many leaps that I need to implement for a while. But then as soon as I then have got that next level, then I'll be like, okay, what's next? And then something else, and then something else. So it's kind of like a stepped process, definitely. But I think the biggest change for me was community. I was prior to plugging into any kind of group thing, I was felt like a very, very lone worker. I felt kind of quite isolated in my job within the NHS, isolated in my way of thinking, because, as I say, it felt like me and the women and babies against the establishment. And then I was having amazing relationships, like really when you have clients that you have one visit with them and you think, God, these people would be mates. I'd go around their house for dinner. But then and they'd be like, thank you so much, and it's been amazing. But then the relationship would always end. So you'd have interaction, but you wouldn't really have a relationship or company. So it felt like I was a lone worker. And I think the main thing really about joining like membership or masterminds is suddenly just having community, people working on stuff themselves, and that's made a big difference to my mental health even, and for me, dare I say it, COVID actually has been more of a connecting thing for me, where people were isolated, because I wasn't particularly on Zoom, I wasn't particularly reaching out, so because of that change, it means like we're talking to Anna in South Africa, so it kind of made you realise that you could be connected to people via Zoom more easily. And that was a big change for my business as well, because I'd always thought you can't possibly do baby stuff one-to-many. It's not, how would it be possible? I need to be in the room with them, but as I say, we're doing a Zoom on this Wednesday as a follow-up clinic. I just wouldn't have thought that was physically, that couldn't happen, because I'd have to be there. And now the women are willing to accept that invitation to come to a follow-up clinic on Zoom.
Yeah, it's crazy how the world has changed, isn't it, really, when you think about it, and you think about the last, especially for those of us who have been in this world for quite a while, 10 years or whatever, like we've had to really pivot a lot of times. We've had to be really flexible in what we offer. And it's so interesting. Someone who I did yoga with my first son, so he's about to turn 17, so it was like 17 years ago. She was amazing, did active yoga with her for active birth. And then she went off and did something else for a few years, and she came back and she was just like, I cannot believe, I think she'd only gone for about 3 years, maybe 4. And she came back and she was like, I don't know what to do. I can't, this world has changed so utterly. And this is even before COVID. I don't know who I am. I don't know how to advertise my services. I don't know how to get clients. So she was like fully booked, everything, you know what I mean? And I really felt for her. And it is true that that's how fast these things change. Yeah. And I think even more so over the last 4 years when it comes to like the online world, people's buying habits, what the world wants. Luckily for us, people are always having babies, which is really, really good for our industry. But it is, you have to be so willing to relook at things, revisit things, try different stuff out, and be really flexible, don't you, to do this job, I think.
And I think the other thing that made me think of then 2 things. One was how I used to have flyers and put my first aid courses up on the village hall, kind of with a poster. And I remember I kind of still jokingly just say, I really liked flyers, I miss flyers, as a way of advertising. But you need to be a little bit kind of flexible and entrepreneurial and willing to try things. But the other thing that made me think is my newsletter. I write a weekly newsletter to perinatal practitioners, and 10 years ago I'd be like, oh, like what am I going to write about, nothing's happened in a week, like what could I possibly write about? Whereas now I feel like, okay, another newsletter, I can write a newsletter each week. There's every aspect of business, there's every aspect of lactation, midwifery. You could write hundreds and hundreds of newsletters. And just as advice to anybody in business, is that you don't know who's watching or listening in this sense, because I have people that say, I've been wanting to join your courses for the last 3 years. And I'm like, who is this? Who's Heather, or who, I don't know their name. And also we've just done a launch, and I feel like I'm, sort of repeating and repeating, and I'm doing a story and I'm doing a live, and and you're just like, hello, is anyone out there? And then and I have a lot of people that will backwards and forwards, and you've seen their name and their names come up loads and they never seem to book on, but you just see their name again coming to a free webinar, and then just some random name comes up and you're like, who is this person? And they've been reading my newsletter and I didn't have a clue. So I think keeping that faith that, you saying, so yes, there's no point meeting the midwives won't recommend me, but they can recommend you to their sister and their auntie, and they, when they're not at work, and they can, so it is worth having those relationships. It is worth still doing things for free, even though you may not see the return straight after you do it. So you think, well, there's no point doing that actively. Or even I did a talk for microbirth, and we had a load of low cost masterclasses, and we hardly sold anything. I didn't make the money back on what I paid them for this electronic stool that I needn't have done. And I thought, oh, that wasn't worth it. But I've since had people still popping up now and saying, oh, yes, I saw you. They've just watched the replay and it was in February. And I'm like, oh, so in maybe a year or two, I might look back and actually go, that outlay in February that I felt like it wasn't worth it, several years later may have actually brought in quite a lot of revenue longer term.
Yeah.
Definitely. You never know when the return is going to come in as well. And sometimes we can be too quick to kind of judge whether something did or didn't work, and kind of, throw the toys out the pram and be like, oh, well, I'm not doing that again. But you really don't know. I think it is like a data gathering exercise and patience as well to see how something turns out. Dee, I feel like we could talk forever, but we've already been talking for 45 minutes. So I don't want to take up too much of your time, or we don't want to take up too much more of your time. So I would love to ask you our final question, which is, what is the one piece of advice you would give a birth or baby business owner who wants to create an impactful and sustainable business?
I think probably a little bit along the lines of what we've just been saying about getting to know people, but collaboration. I think collaboration is key. Not necessarily specifically in your industry, but like, for instance, giving a talk for the local pregnancy yoga teacher, maybe even giving something of yours for something of theirs, or or collaborate to provide a service to their audience. So kind of leveraging other people's audiences, I guess, is the title for that, but in an authentic way. So you're giving it authentically, and meeting people. I remember I went to a baby show type thing, and an osteopath went out of their way to come and say hello to me and meet me, and was particularly nice rather than sort of networky. And and we got chatting, and another osteopath who said, oh, would you be interested in meeting for coffee? And I was like, oh yeah, okay. And we met for coffee. And interestingly, then they are always the two people that are uppermost in my mind when I was then referring people to osteopaths. And it was because of their authentic connection with me, as opposed to kind of cold calling me with emails. You get people saying, oh, can you give this out, and can I do this for you? And you're like, but I don't know you. So making that human authentic connection, I think, always makes people more likely to want to work with you and recommend you. And as I say, it's not even just to their clients, it's sometimes their family as well. So I'm seeing professionals, family members, they recommend me to their family as well.
Amazing. Brilliant.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Dee. Go on, Liz.
No, you crack on.
No, I was going to say it's those things that make business fun as well, isn't it? Those relationship building and connections and things. So yeah, and you've been so generous with your time today, and obviously everything you've shared as well has been absolutely brilliant to have you on. So thank you for joining us. We're going to end it there, but if you have been listening, we would love you to share and like, and also go down to the notes at the bottom of this to find out where you can follow Dee. Dee, do you want to just share your Instagram handle or your website so that people can find you?
Yeah, Instagram is at Infant Feeding Academy, and that's probably the best. And also then our website is www.theinfantfeedingacademy.co.uk. So just Infant Feeding Academy on Instagram. That's because I was hacked. And the Infant Feeding Academy on website.
Thank you. And thanks for listening. And do give us a like or follow and subscribe if you can. And we will see you next week.
Bye.